Okay, good morning, everyone. I think we've got a number of people in attendance, so as it's 11 o'clock, we'll begin now. I'll start by introducing myself. My name's Lewis Green. I'm the data analyst here at AROC. I've been working here for a number of years. I've probably spoken to a number of you either on the phone or via email. And also, please do let me know if you can't hear my voice or anything, or if there's any issues with the audio. You can chat through the message, but I'm not going to be able to monitor that very closely throughout the webinar. But if there is anything that crops up, please do let me know. This is the first time we're conducting one of these webinars. We're hoping to begin running more of these as time goes on. Obviously, the one this afternoon on data upload we're doing, and then the scope is to do more clinical ones and perhaps repeat this webinar in the future if it's useful to people. So what we'll be doing at the end of this, I'll be putting a link on the same location where you found this webinar. There'll be a link we'll add at the end of this session that'll take you to a short survey. So we'd really appreciate it if you could fill that in and let us know what you liked and didn't like and what you'd like covered more of or less of. It'll really help us in the future for when we run these again. So in saying that, today we will be covering the data entry aspect. So I just want to be clear, there are a number of you that enter your data directly into AOS. So this is the webinar that's useful for you. If you find yourself, if you're a site that uses data upload, then if you upload your data to us, then you will be probably better suited to the afternoon session. The afternoon session is going to be focused on those sites that enter their data into a PAS system and then extract that data out and upload it to us. So this webinar won't focus on that process. So if that's for you, you're probably better just to log out and come back in at the 1 p.m. session. And so we will be recording this. I'm not sure if we'll be uploading it straight away to the website, but some of our online training materials are a bit out of date. So the plan is that we'll record this whole session and anything we can use to update our online training, we'll definitely be using. So if you're not in attendance today, there will certainly be material available online later, and hopefully we'll be running these again if people find them useful. So you're not missing too much if you're not here right this moment. Yes, and I can see you typing, so Kerry Whitford, yes, no worries. The typing is working, the chat is working well. So I'm going to begin by showing you the basics. I know for some of you this will be a going over material you're very familiar with, but I think it's useful because we get a number of frequently asked questions, and I just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page and we're all dealing with the same material, so I don't want anyone to feel left behind. So just by going through to what's the data collection forms, which is the first port of call when it comes to collecting the AROC data and entering it into our system. So if we go to our website, all the materials that are useful for the data entry at this point in time that we're talking about, I always recommend this link here, AOS documentation. It's on the right-hand side, and it'll take you to what we call our Confluence page that has a huge number of useful resources. And primarily what we're talking about to start with is the data collection forms. Now, I know a lot of you will be familiar with these, but it's important that you understand this is the source for them. So if there was a change to the forms, if you weren't sure if you had the latest version, you can always come here and be guaranteed that what we have available here is the most up-to-date version of the form. You can see there's a number of forms for the different data sets. Today's webinar, I'll mostly be focusing on inpatient direct care pathway 3. It's the largest data set we collect, and it's probably most relevant to most of you here. But in saying that, the data entry process isn't too different for ambulatory or paediatric data collection either. So don't feel that if you're in one of those spaces that this won't be relevant. It's just simply that the data items you'll be seeing will be related to inpatient overnight direct care. So this is the data collection forms. The data dictionaries are also a great resource. If you have any questions about what the data items mean, clinical definitions, how they're used, that's all available in these forms. And again, you can see there's a number of them depending on what you're after. Data dictionary for clinicians, Australia and New Zealand, probably the two primary ones, but the analysts can be useful, and also the ones for paediatric and ambulatory are available. The one other thing I will mention while we're here, just because it's very relevant at this time of year, is our data deadlines can be found here. As you can see, we're getting right up to this point here. So if any of you don't have your data in for the calendar year period, it's a great time to be focusing on that, because as of the 14th of February, we will be closing the data off. So anything that's not entered by then won't be included in the calendar year report. So please do make yourself familiar with this page and try to keep up with the data collection. It's best for everyone if you can. There is this page as well, which is the data entry. This is what we'll be going through today. So this is the online resources you can access at any time that go over the stuff that we'll be looking at today in the webinar. So I think that's a good introduction to Confluence and what you can find there. So I'll go back to our homepage. And as you're probably all familiar with, you can log in by clicking this big red button. Now, I've created a contact that I can walk us through today. It'll have the same or similar access to what you guys will see when you're using our system. So we're into the system now. You can see this is the webinar links that you've seen, and this is where I'll be putting up the feedback once we're finished with this seminar. So do come here once we're finished, and please do follow that link. It's really useful to us. The data entry, as you're probably familiar, access just under the data heading. There are a number of other useful links that I'm hoping we can quickly look at the end, but I'm going to focus on data entry to begin with, and we'll just walk through and simulate entering a patient. So just Patrick being helpful. So once you select here, you'll see the list of all the facilities that you have access to. Most of you probably only have one, but if you have access to more, it's obviously, you have to be very careful that you click the right one when you're entering a patient, because after that, there's no changing. Another useful feature that will be relevant to some of you is if you're a facility that has multiple wards linked to your account, to your hospital, and your facility reports by ward, a data item that's incredibly important in that process is the ward code. If the ward code isn't provided to us accurately and consistently, then we don't know where to assign that episode, and it will get lost in reporting. So you have the ability to select the ward right here at this point. If I select the ward as opposed to the hospital, it's the exact same process. I'm still adding an episode to that hospital, but the difference is it'll pre-fill that ward code for me, so that there's no way I can make a mistake, and I can guarantee that episode will be assigned to the hospital, the right ward in the hospital. So for this case, I'll just do a completely basic example. It's just at the hospital, so nothing will be pre-filled. The first step you should always be familiar with, and you should always be doing before you enter a new patient, is searching to see if they're already in the system. Because if they've already been entered, you don't have to re-enter the things like their date of birth or their patient information. So the first thing I'll do is I'll test by entering a patient's identifier, which most facilities will use a medical record number or a national health index number. We don't specify what it has to be. It's just important that this is a number you can use to find this patient in your records if we ever need to mesh it up. So I've typed in 1, 2, 3, 4. Now another thing I will bring up at this point, because I think it's useful, is a number of facilities use a number that has leading zeros. So it might be 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you notice if I search for that, I won't find the patient. So I always recommend searching just on the number without any leading zeros. I find that it's more consistent. You might find there's more patients that appear, but as long as you can identify which is the correct one, you don't have the risk of accidentally entering the same patient twice. In this case, I'm going to say that I don't want to add anything to these patients. I could add more episodes, but in this case, I'll be creating a new patient. And because I'd entered and searched for it already, I actually don't have to type the patient identifier again. So that's why it's a good practice to search first, and you don't waste any time really. So we'll just put in some fake information. I'll just walk through the process. I'm not clinically trained myself, I won't go into deep discussions over what the clinical relevance of certain data items are at this session, but if that's something you need covered or you want to address more thoroughly, that's a great thing to give us in our feedback, please. I'm mostly just going to be focusing on the practices of using the system and perhaps tips and tricks and frequently asked questions. So the letters of name is an interesting one because we don't actually record the name of the patient. Our data set is de-identified, but to generate the letters of name, it is required you enter it here. So this is actually a unique part of the data entry where I can put in a name and hit generate, and all that's saved in our system is this de-identified letters of name. We're actually not saving this information at all. And I can confirm this by hitting save and validate, and now that's what's being submitted to us, what's on the page here. So I'm happy that that's correct. I can hit save and return to list, and my new patient's there. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm going to walk through an inpatient data entry. Ambulatory is quite similar as far as the practice is concerned, just the data items will differ. And those will be addressed on the data collection form you've downloaded. So hit inpatient. Now, this is an important step that, as I said, Pathway 3 is the inpatient direct care. It's a primary data set. Some of you do collect Pathways 1 and 2, but most of the data we receive is Pathway 3. So be aware that if you accidentally click 2, what you might end up with is not submitting that episode into the right pool, and it won't be included in reporting. The data items will also slightly differ. So do be careful with this first step. If you're intending to enter inpatient direct care, it's very crucial you do get that right at the beginning. So this was as I said, this facility has a ward code. So I'm going to enter an incorrect ward code, and we'll see an error at the end to let us know that we've done something wrong. And this is just going to be dummy data that I'll enter. This is probably a useful time as well to say that the data entry process, you can use your mouse to be clicking, but the whole thing has been designed around, you don't have to. If you want, you can use tab keys and shift tab to go forward and backwards, and then your numbers and keypads to enter all the data. So I'll demonstrate some of that by just entering this now. Oh, and another thing that we do have brought up a number of times, do take note of this date format. The year does have to be entered with all 4 characters. If you enter without the 20, what you'll end up with is the episode not actually saving at all, because our system doesn't know whether to put the slashes, and it will cause an error and say, no, we can't upload this episode, please enter the date correctly. So we do get a number of people querying this, so just take note of the date format we require. Okay. You'll notice some items like funding source, depending on what I enter here, it'll change what options are available to me. If I enter that they're self-funded, that's the end, and I don't need to add anything else. If I enter that they're private health insurance, then I then have the option to add what the who the health insurer is. This data item here that follows is an interesting one because it's not actually part of our data set. So we don't require it from AROC's perspective, but a number of your sites will enter data to us and then extract what are called HCP extracts. If you're familiar with that process, you know what I'm talking about. But if you're a site that has to provide those HCP extracts to the health funds, then it is important you add this item here. So that's why we've made it available to you, so that you can continue to provide the health funds with the member number. This is obviously a very crucial item to get right, because it does determine certainly some impairment-specific items later on, as well as how the episode will be reported ultimately. So again, I'm just randomly putting this information in, but I have selected an episode that has impairment-specific items, so we'll see those later on in the process. I'm just entering the dates in a way that I know won't cause an error for now. And then when I've finished, I'm going to go back and I'm going to change 1 or 2 of them, and I'll show you how the date errors work, because we do get a number of questions around how to understand what the error means and how to look to find the solution. So to start off with, I'm just going to enter it in a very simple way that shouldn't give me an error, and then I'll show you the way that the errors can be visualized. This is another example of an item that, depending on what you answer, it'll open up more options for you to follow up. So you can get errors for saying yes and then not providing items. So be aware that if you're saying yes, that we're expecting certainly something else to be added here. You'll see there's a number of items that can really take the page out, but as long as you're entering everything as it pops up, you shouldn't be getting errors on the page. Okay, so now I've entered the first page. What I can do is I can actually save this without continuing if I want, and that'll give me all the errors that I've currently already established. So if I press this, it actually saves the data as it currently is. And that's not a bad habit to get into. So see here already, I mentioned before that the ward code I entered wasn't valid. I knew that was going to be the case, but I can click here and see that this hospital uses a specific ward list and the ward code I provided is not valid. So I know that, I'll keep it there and we'll go through all the errors at the end. And there are a couple of blue ones. For those of you who aren't familiar, we call them cross-checks often if it's blue. It doesn't mean that it's technically wrong or definitely wrong. It just means that it's a bit unusual that it's been entered this way. So we do ask you to double check, make sure that you're confident that it's right. If it is correct, you can just leave it. It's not a problem if it's correct. It's just there because our system has the ability to check for unusual things, and that's one of the ways we display that to you. A red error, on the other hand, is something that is wrong, and this would be an issue if I was reporting with this episode because it wouldn't be included in my report. So do be aware of the red errors. It's something that should be fixed. Blue errors, just double check them. And again, the member number here wasn't provided. And it lets me know that it's required for HCP. So let's just put a member number in. So now that's actually pretty good. I can go through. Now, because the episode's already established and it's in the system, it's going to start by giving me errors to start with. But because we're providing information, that's not a problem. So we'll go through and we'll tick a couple of things. Say there was 0 leave days and 0 occurrences, and 0 of those. And what I'll do here, I'll enter the start information. You'll know that I'm saying everything started on the same day, and that's just the error thing I was talking about. But what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll enter some fake FIM information, but I won't enter the end information, because what a lot of facilities like to do is enter when the patient comes onto the ward and they have the beginning items, you can actually go through and enter all the beginning items, leave the end items blank. Say we're not at the episode ends, we don't worry about that. What we will do, we'll go to the summary page. So you could do this while the patient's still on the ward and still receiving care, and you've entered the initial information. You can come to the summary page and you can see a lot of information that's already been generated. For example, the patient's already been assigned to an ANSNAP class. This is printable, you'll note as well. It's got the age, the gender, the FIM total start, and then on top of that, we also have the benchmark values. So these are values that are taken every 6 months. We do benchmarking on what the expected length of stay and expected FIM change are. We use this ANSNAP class to determine what those values are, and then every 6 months we update AOS so that the number displayed here is what we would expect a patient in this SNAP class length of stay to be in this circumstance, and that's based on last year's numbers and figures. We also note you have the FIM splat, which is a useful way to visualise the patient's functional measures, and you can see down here. So this is something that you could print off and keep on the ward if it was useful to you. It certainly has a lot of information there, and I think it's something that people perhaps didn't know existed. So I'm happy for people to use that. So I'll go back and I'll continue, assuming now that the patient has completed their rehab, and I'll continue entering their end scores. And let's just say this patient did excellently. Thank you. Okay, so now we're almost at the end of the episode here, right up to the episode end. So if you're doing this frequently, I think you'd find that you didn't take so long with it. But if you're finding issues with the process, it's always something we like to have feedback on, because I mean, you guys do more of the data entry than we do. We've designed it around a way that we think is the most useful, but if you're entering a lot of patients and you're finding something that could be improved, we're always happy to hear feedback like that. Yes. This is an important data item. So, I mean, all the data items I will say are important, but this one certainly is important in the sense that depending on how the episode ends, it will determine whether the episode is considered a complete episode or an incomplete episode. And that does make a difference in reporting. So do make sure that as much as everything you should be careful with, that's an item you certainly don't want to be making a mistake with. Plenty of things to enter, and we'll save and continue. Now, this is the impairment specific tab that I'm taking you to now. Not every episode, not every impairment has impairment specific items, and depending on the impairment, they will vary. So I know that not every site historically has collected these, but they are all on the data collection form and it's all accessible through our system. So if you have any issues with them, please do let me know. Again, I'll just fill out some basic information. Some of these might give me errors because I'm not putting a lot of thought into this making sense. So let's see at the end if I've caused an issue. Let's save and continue. Now this is the audit screen. Oh no, the comments, sorry, of course. So here you can enter any comments. If you've entered other or you have any issues that you couldn't enter what you would have liked to enter, this is a great place to place it. Certainly then if you enter a comment here and then send an email to us to say we've entered this patient, we've left this comment in the comment section relating to it, was there a better way for me to enter it? Anything like that is useful. We don't go through the comments on every episode, obviously, because it's free text, but it's certainly a useful place for yourself and to keep track of anything that was unusual or different in the data entry process. So now we've come to the audit. So this is always a page you want to make sure you're reviewing before you finalise. The ward code, I spoke about that before. We knew that was going to be an issue, so I'm happy that's there. And these are some impairment-specific items that I obviously didn't clearly read what I was doing and I've made some mistakes, so that's obviously understandable. The only other one that's a bit unusual is that my discharge delay was entered as a yes, but I didn't put any days between the two dates, so it's a bit confused as to whether there really was a delay. But again, that's a blue error. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's incorrect. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to go back and show you how, if one of my dates was out, how that would be displayed to you and how it's easy for you to understand what that date might be. So I'm going to turn this into a 2017 and assume that was a typo. I'm going to click directly to the audit. Remember, every time I click up the top, I am saving the process. So that will make a difference. And now, this episode, now we see that there is issues with the date. You can see that the date it's referring to and saying is incorrect. It actually mentions the referral date. It can be a bit difficult for our system to know what the incorrect date is, because there's so many dates and there's so many different rules around when they occur. I would always encourage people not to get too fixated on what the words say here for what date's incorrect. The best method, I think, is if you look at this summary table here, and all you're really needing to be looking for is going from left to right and making sure everything is occurring on or before the next date. And once you get to one that's not, you can pretty clearly see that this is on or before, and then, whoop, 2017. That's my mistake. It's quite common to overlook those, and I understand that. You're sitting there looking at data all day. It's very easy to make a mistake like that. But we do have a number of people that get fixated on the words here. And I would say that they're a clue and they're a guide sometimes. And that there is logic to it. The referral date must occur on or before the assessment date and subsequent dates, which it's not doing, but this might make you think that the referral date's the problem when it may not be. So do look at those date issues and go back to your forms and make sure you know what date is incorrect, and this one it's a 2017. So now that everything's entered, we can go to the summary screen, and all that same information we had before. We have the estimated values, we have length of stay, and now we actually have the FIM change because we have the total FIM scores. You can see that this patient's done excellently and they've improved as much as possible. But this is another page that people find useful to print off and use as a summary for the episode. I think that's most of the features of the data entry process. The only other things I can fix up these issues, like to fix the issue, it is as simple as just pressing on your SWs, the ward code, and I can just click here to see if that's confirmed what I thought it should have done. And as I see now, the red arrow is gone. So that episode now would be correctly assigned. And I'll change this. So again, here, this is an example. This is showing up as red. And you might think that, oh, but that's right, I know that's right, and not think to look at the other dates. It is important that the dates all interact with each other. So if one's out, it can make a lot of them look like they're wrong. It could just be one error. Just review them all and double check what's wrong. Okay, other than those minor errors in the impairment specific items, I think we've covered most of the data entry process. As you see, it's not too time intensive. I mean, I've taken a while here because I've been explaining it all, but if you're doing it with the keyboard and mouse, you can breeze through it quite quickly. But again, if you're finding things that take longer than you feel they should, that's great feedback for us, and we're always interested to hear that sort of thing. Once you've completed the patient, as I said, it's saved every time I'm clicking these tabs. Also hitting save and continue will save it. But all you need to do to enter another one, I can just go up here and click change patient. Gives you a warning to let you know if I'd made changes on this page, they would be lost, but because I haven't, I'm happy to click that. Back at the beginning, and I can just enter a new patient identifier, and I could begin entering another one. I don't know if there's much point in me going through another whole patient. I think I've addressed the main features of AOS and the data entry. Yeah, certainly as well, you can use this to search for patients that have previously entered and review them, if, like whether it's you that's entered them or not. If you wanted to see how it's been entered, this is always available, and you can find any patient that's been previously entered and see how they performed and see what their data looked like. This is always available to you, so that's useful as well. If you're having issues, you can always, there's menus up here. This will open up an email to AROC and you can send it to us and we can clarify. Just make sure if you're sending us emails and queries about specific things, that you do mention who you are, the hospital, and the patient identifier, so that we can review it more easily from our end. And if there's issues with the way it's displaying on the screen, you think there actually might be an error, screenshots always are useful as well. Okay, since we're doing pretty well for time, do feel free to type any questions in if you have any, but I might also just try and quickly touch on two other features that I mentioned earlier. Well, three perhaps. So the data audit is something that we've looked at addressing errors one at a time. So as you enter the patient, you see all the errors. If you wanted to view all the errors over a month period or 12-month period, or as much as you want, you can actually use this data audit feature. Again, same process for selecting where you want the audit to be taking place. You enter some basic parameters. And I'm happy with that. And there's obviously a lot of dummy data because this is a fake hospital and there's a lot of errors in here. But the patient that I did enter, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's appeared in the audit, and I can fix that as well as the other one. So if you're, depending on how your facility operates, it might be useful for you to deal with a lot of errors at once or view all the errors at once. This option is always available to you, and you can download it, as you can see, as soon as the patient's been entered into the system. There's no wait until that appears there. Another feature that I think is very useful, certainly at this time of year with the data deadline coming up, is the data summary. This is a feature that just lets you know how many episodes you've entered for the current reporting period. So pathway 3, that's letting you know it's the inpatient direct care we talked about. And again, this hospital's a dummy hospital with not real data, so I'm not expecting to see much here. But you can see that your count of episodes per month and the number of errors. It's worth noting that that's not the number of episodes with errors, it's just the number of errors. So if I had a patient that didn't have any FIM scores entered, that's already a lot of errors for that one episode. So seeing huge numbers here might seem alarming, but it could just be 1 or 2 patients. A good example of how to use this would be that you would find the month and then use the data audit I just showed you, get all the errors, and you can go into your system and make all the changes you needed to do. If you had access to more hospitals, they would just display in this list below Anywhere Hospital. And one final thing I think I'd like to show you quickly is, the one thing I didn't mention with the data summary, please note it only updates once per day. So if the one part of our site that doesn't behave instantly is the data summary, if I enter an episode, it won't be in that table until the following day. So at midnight that night, it will be updated and the numbers will change, and then you can view it the next day and see what your episodes look like. Everything else is instant as far as being able to access it, like you saw in the data audit. And what I'll show you in the data extract now, and this is just a quick run through. I don't want to spend a huge amount of time talking about this, but again, if you have questions, please do let us know. This has a lot of parameters you can enter. You can choose what data you want to extract, and it'll give it to you in a CSV file. So for those of you who aren't familiar, CSV is just a data format, and really conveniently, you can view it in Excel. So it's really useful if you're at all handy with Excel. You can download any data you've provided to us going back as far as since AROC began, and you can extract that data and you can view all the data items as well as a lot of the derived items. Like you noticed before, when I entered the patient, the ANSNAP class was generated. That information will be available in your extract, as well as some benchmark values. All the values that we think that are useful for analysis should be findable in that Excel CSV file that you can extract. If you're wanting to interpret the CSV file, when I previously showed you the data dictionaries, there's one there called the data dictionary for analysts. That will be the most useful data dictionary. It has more data items in it, and it gives you more of a sense of how to analyze the data yourself. This is a feature that I think is really powerful and really useful if you have the ability to look at data yourself. But we're also happy to hear feedback about this, because I personally don't get a great sense of how much people use this. If you're finding that using it a lot, or you would use it more if things were different, that would be really useful feedback for us as well. I'll just show you a quick example, and we'll try and find that same episode we entered before. You'll note that what we're going to extract is all down here. What I'm entering up here is just adding things to it. So I can select, I want to have stroke, hemorrhagic, and I also want to have pulmonary. For whatever reason, they're the two cohorts of patients I want to extract. You'll see I had to drop down, click add, and then down the bottom here you'll see. So this is the summary of what I'll be extracting. If I want to go back, and I know that the patient I entered was an MPT patient, so that I won't find a patient there. So I'm going to clear those filters. Confirm. It tells me how many episodes are in my data set for the hospital, how many fall in that date range, and how many fall in the criteria. So some could be filtered out, and that's a good sense of, if you have an idea of what you should be extracting and this table doesn't tee up, you might have to go back to your parameters and re-enter them. I simply hit download, and I have my CSV X file in Excel. So hope you can see the Excel file now. One trick that I think a lot of people have not been aware of, if you get a file like this and you see the dates aren't working, you can select this top left corner, double click your adjust, and everything will display nicely for you. And you can see that all the information, if I find the patient identifier 1, 2, 3, 4, this row here, this is the patient we just entered, and you can see that everything is in this file. All the dates, all the FIM scores, and then going towards the end, we end up with a lot of the derived items. FIM change, case mix adjusted scores. There's a huge amount of analysis potential in this data. So I do encourage anyone who has any idea of what they're doing or wants to learn more about this, you really should be having a look at this feature. I think it's really powerful if you have an interest in this sort of stuff. So I'll get rid of that. So as this was the first webinar, we weren't really sure how long it was going to take us to walk through any of this. So it does look like it's gone quite quickly as far as all the things I really wanted to cover in the session. Going forward, obviously, we're going to be interested in adjusting, running these again if they're useful. If you have any questions, do send them through now. If there's anything that I haven't addressed or you'd like addressed more thoroughly, it'll be a great time. Also in the feedback when we put that up would be also useful. Possibly. The other features that can be accessed through AOS are your details and your facility details. So if you're accessing your facility details and you find that contacts aren't correct or there's information here that is incorrect, because we rely on user feedback to keep our database up, these sorts of database up to date, it's always useful if you find something that's not correct, do just let us know, because we are constantly updating and we're keeping it as accurate as possible. But in the hospital sector, as we know, there's a lot of changes, so things can get out of date pretty quickly. All right, I might be inclined to call it there. If there's not any pressing questions you have, I'll sign off and I'll make the link available for feedback. Anything you can let us know would be great. And thank you very much for attending.